I was in the midst of playing Fortnite with my friends Stacy and Juanito when my mother began to call for me. "Gordon," she cried out. "Gordon, please come downstairs." I could tell my mother was distressed, so I told my friends if I went down to move on without me. They agreed and promised a dub. I got up as fast as my portly body would allow, and I ran down the stairs. "Mother, what is it?" I said as I entered the living room. I was met not only by my mother, but two police officers. One with a gun, and the other a pair of nunchucks. "Gordon," my mother said, "it seems there have been a string of murders, and at every crime scene written in fecal matter is your name. Do you have any idea why?" Without hesitation, I said no. The police officers, not sure if I was lying, looked at each other, and after a moment they looked back at me. "Now, son, if you're telling me the truth, then we fear your life might be in danger." "Danger?" my mother said. "Oh heavens." She then placed the back of her hand atop her forehead and fainted backwards. Unfortunately for her, our coffee table was right behind her, and she went crashing through it, covering herself in lacerations. "God damn," the officer with the nunchuck said. He then pulled out his cell phone and called an ambulance. After giving them my address, he hung up and told me I could either go to the hospital with my mother or to the police station with them till she was better. Knowing how boring and depressing a hospital could be, I decided to go with the policeman. As we drove to the station, I became curious to why I was in danger, and I began to ask questions. "So," I casually said from the back seat, "how long has this stuff been going on?" "For about 6 months," one of the officers said. Surprised they answered so easily, I continued. "Where did they get enough fecal matter to spell out my entire name? And why?" "We don't really know why, sadly. And as for the poop, it seems it was acquired from the victim's body through some sort of suction mechanism." Jesus, I thought to myself. I then asked how many victims there were. The police officer under his breath began to count. After a brief moment, he responded 12 humans, 13 house cats, and 84 farm animals. Genuinely confused and realizing whatever the hell happened would take a whole lot more than a car ride worth of questions, I decided to stop. We arrived at the police station, and the officers became on edge when they realized the power was out. "Shouldn't the backup generators be running?" the officer with the nunchuck said. "They sure as shit should," the one with the gun replied. Just as he finished speaking, a distressed policewoman came running into the front lobby. "Thank God you're here. Everyone's dead and covered in poop." She holstered her gun and started to approach us to further elaborate, but as she did, a tall gray body began to materialize behind her. "Holy shit! It's the monster from the security footage," the policeman said. He then raised his gun and began to rapidly fire. Sadly, his aim was terrible, and each shot went flying into the policewoman, killing her instantly. "Aw shit," he said as his gun clicked 3 times. The tall gray body, fully materialized at this point, began to scream menacingly. As it did so, more muscle began to materialize around its body. Without warning, the monster began to viciously assault the officer with the gun. With his last words, he screamed, "Y'all niggas need to run." As soon as he was finished speaking, a tentacle from the alien's body entered his mouth, and his eyes began to glow bright yellow. Before I could see what happened, the officer with the nunchucks grabbed my hand, and we ran away. On the other side of the police station, we found a vacant office and began to barricade the door. As soon as we finished, the monster began to viciously bang at it. Knowing any moment that door would come flying off the hinges, the officer with the nunchucks handed me a gun he had holstered in the back of his waistband and told me to get ready. Right after the officer's warning, the door came crashing down and the monster came storming in. As it did, I began to rapidly fire. I hit the monster at least 7 times, but it was no use. The monster was able to regenerate and heal its wounds almost instantly. Realizing I was out of ammunition, the officer told me to stand back as he pulled out his nunchucks. He, without fear, began to rush the monster. He had the fury of 14 samurais, and he connected on almost every single hit he threw. He was much faster than the monster, who desperately tried to fend him off. Knowing it was outmatched, the monster tried to dematerialize, but as it did so, the officer with the nunchucks connected a hit square on the monster's temple, knocking it unconscious. Knowing the monster could wake up at any minute, we tried to figure out what to do next. And as we did, we noticed the monster began to fade away, and all that was left was a frail, naked man. "Jesus Christ," I said. "It's you." The officer, confused as how I recognized the man, asked who he was. He was my 3rd grade substitute teacher. His name is Mr. Bonkell. Once upon a time, we were supposed to catch the heads, but him knowing I'd beat the brakes off his monkey ass transferred school districts overnight. Was he always like this? The officer with the nunchucks asked me. Before I could answer, a mysterious voice said, "Not always." We looked across the room to see a kid a few years older than me appear from the shadows. After Mr. Bonkell left your school, he came to mine. He told me about y'all's beef, and he promised me extra credit if I helped him invent something that would make him strong enough to kick your ass. However, something went terribly wrong, and we created a monster. At first, I tried to ignore what I had done, but the guilt began to consume me. Every day for the last 6 or so months, I've tried to find this son of a bitch and kill him once and for all. Look, buddy, I just shot this thing 7 times and it's still alive. As soon as it wakes up, it's going to kill all of us. Well, let's make sure it doesn't wake up then, the mysterious kid said. He then pulled out a beaker from his backpack that was filled with purple glowing goo, and informed us that this was an antidote he created. He then poured the purple goo all over Mr. Bonkell, which then began to destroy his flesh. "Oh God, it smells terrible," the officer with the nunchucks said. After about 30 seconds, Mr. Bonkell was completely gone. The officer then gave both me and the student who saved us a ride home, and I never saw Mr. Bonkell again.